I think you may have heard this line before. I asked for Guinness and he gave me beer. That is an iambic pentameter. It is natural for an English speaker to speak in 10-beat lines. Shakespeare wasn't the first to use blank verse. And as soon as he gets familiar with it, he breaks the rule. And the rule is always broken because of an emotional change, because another character comes into the room, or because a character of a different status speaks. Only the early plays are strictly blank verse. The biggest help for any actor coming to Shakespeare for the first time is to look how words in opposition to each other, words in contradiction to each other, or words in complement to each other are in the text, because that is Shakespeare giving you stepping stones throughout the text. There's no right or wrong, there's only clearer. It will be clearer. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Then in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Welcome back to the studio, where with the help of our actors, Cam and Brooke, we'll start to explore the specific tools that modern actors use in rehearsal to unlock Shakespeare's verse and bring Shakespeare's plays to life on stage. Today's actors must figure out how to honor the complex language Shakespeare wrote for his characters while still making it sound natural and spontaneous. For most actors, this takes a lot of practice. And just like an audience member attending a Shakespeare play for the first time, actors approaching Shakespeare sometimes find the verse a bit intimidating at the beginning of their training. Brooke and Cam, I'm curious whether that was true for you.
Well, I think it's interesting because, yes, it is a challenge to grasp onto the heightened language in the beginning, but I think with more experience and skill building and practice, like you say, you learn a whole lot more about how Shakespeare left in certain cues and breadcrumbs to lead you down the way. And eventually you can learn how to act it well.
Great. Brooke?
I think the biggest challenge is just making sure that the audience understands you, and also the biggest fear, can they get the story? Am I communicating the language clearly to them? But as Cam said, there's breadcrumbs throughout, and if you honor and respect and trust that the language is there, then it starts to feel more natural.
Yeah, I agree. At the beginning of my career, when I started to act Shakespeare, at first I also felt like the rhythm of the verse trapped me a little bit. I was afraid it would sound sing-songy or unnatural, because when I spoke it aloud, I wanted to hit the rhythm in which it appears on the page. But as I gained more experience over time, I realized that the rhythm of the verse was actually just there to support my acting and not to hinder it.
Gives you more freedom than actually...
Yeah, it provides the freedom to work within that structure. So let's talk about how the verse itself works and begin exploring how actors decode it. First of all, Shakespeare writes his plays in a form called blank verse, also known as iambic pentameter. This just means that one verse line is made up of 10 beats, positioned in a roughly unstressed, stressed pattern. Let me demonstrate using two simple but pretty famous lines. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Listen again. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun. So you can hear that the words just fall out in that rhythm. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun. That's not only because Shakespeare knew how to arrange the words in such a way that they fall out like that. It's also because the verse pattern is very close to the way a lot of the English language naturally falls out of our mouths. Elizabethans didn't walk around worrying about whether their words were spoken in verse, of course. But they did happen to speak a language that naturally lent itself to the patterns found in iambic pentameter. In fact, it would sound strange if we tried not to use an iambic rhythm to say those two lines. But soft, what light, through yonder wind. Can you hear how much work it takes to say that thought aloud without giving in to the natural iambic rhythm? So we could go so far as to say that Shakespeare wasn't doing anything particularly mysterious by using iambic pentameter. He was just going with the flow of the language he spoke. Another way of saying this is, Shakespeare is very good at placing words in a verse line that reflects and enhances the English language's natural iambic tendency. We're going to explore this idea a bit further by clapping out a simple iambic rhythm together. Feel free to do this along with us. Are we ready? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. If you keep doing this, you might find that you can think of simple thoughts that fall out with that rhythm just because of the way we pronounce and stress certain syllables in the words we use every day. For example, ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. I'm hungry and I'd like to eat some lunch. That's iambic pentameter. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. So Brooke and Cam, can you think of a couple sentences that fall out in iambic pentameter?
Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Last night I had a dream you ran away.
Great. It just happens to fall out iambically due to the way we stress syllables. Cam?
I'm sleepy, so I need to take a nap. But if I sleep too long, it could be bad.
What else do you notice about the rhythm of the verse? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. It mimics the rhythm of the human heartbeat, doesn't it? So not only does the English language often happen to fall out of our mouths in iambic pentameter anyway, but we're also carrying iambic rhythm around in our bodies all the time. We just didn't know to call it that. One more thing. I find Shakespeare easier to memorize when I'm in motion, so sometimes I pace the floor while I'm working on memorization. And at some point I realized while doing that, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Heel toe, heel toe, heel toe, heel toe. It turns out that Shakespeare is also utilizing a rhythm that we carry in our footfalls. If actors can learn to think of Shakespeare's verse form, blank verse, as something that they already carry in their physical bodies, rather than a rule they have to learn, they can start to make his language their own. Now, we don't want to get too hung up on the rhythm of the verse right away. Shakespeare does a good job making that work, and he doesn't need the actors to overdo it. And we now understand that the rhythm is already in us as English speakers anyway. So for now, instead of getting immediately hung up on how many beats there are per line, we're going to approach the text by thinking about something called antithesis. Antithesis refers to the way Shakespeare routinely arranges contrasting images and ideas in very close proximity to each other. Let's look at possibly the most famous speech in Shakespeare, from Hamlet, as an example. Listen to the beginning of the speech and see if you can identify some contrasting images or ideas.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come.
Thanks, Brooke. We can hear contrasting thoughts in the very first line of that speech. The thesis question Hamlet is asking is to be or not to be, whether to live or die. It's hard to imagine greater contrast than that. Then the contrasting or opposing images continue in the next two lines. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. So Hamlet's asking whether it's nobler to keep suffering or to end his life, to make the suffering stop. It's an either-or situation. So a skillful actor uses those opposing images as signposts to help the audience understand the question and the decision Hamlet is trying to make in the speech. Brooke, can you please start the speech again, highlighting the antithetical statements?
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
Thanks, Brooke. Then in the next passage, Hamlet asks what the sleep of death would be like. Would it be silent, ending the heartache, or would there be dreams? He figures it would be one or the other. And by extension, maybe he's asking the audience to weigh in and tell him what to do or which they think is true. This technique, putting contrasting images right next to each other, can be found throughout Shakespeare's verse, and an experienced actor uses these verbal contrasts to help the audience understand the character's thoughts. Now we'll go back to Romeo and Juliet and explore Romeo's speech from Act 2, Scene 2, which you probably recognized earlier because it's famously known as the balcony scene. Romeo has climbed the orchard wall into a courtyard at Juliet's house in the dark, hoping to see her. At the beginning of the scene, she doesn't know he's there. Cam, would you please read the first part of this speech for us, highlighting the opposing thoughts and images as you go?
Soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Rise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. 'Tis my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it.
Thanks, Cam. So listening to Cam work that speech, you might have been able to hear the images, especially the contrasting images of sun and moon. You might also have heard a hitch in the rhythm of one line near the end of the verse. It's unfinished. We're missing 4 beats at the end of the line. Let me clap it out for you slowly. It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. Can you hear the empty beats? It's supposed to be 10 beats per line, which is what makes it pentameter. This doesn't fit. It's only got 6 beats. It might help to take a moment here to look at the verse on the page and address the way actors mark or score the verse in their scripts. The diagonal slash marks delineate each foot in the verse. You can see that each foot contains 2 syllabic beats. And in these lines, you can actually see the empty feet, those 2 feet with no words written in. The actor would mark them like this with the empty slash marks in their script to remind them that those empty feet exist, even though there are no words in them. So each regular iambic verse line has 5 feet and 10 beats per line. After the actor marks their script for the number of feet, they also mark it for the stressed and unstressed syllables, also known as beats. That looks like this. Shakespearean actors often mark their scripts this way, emphasizing both the feet and the beats to help themselves recognize and use the verse effectively. So now we know some basics about how actors mark verse, what is called scansion. We'll come back to that later, but right now let's ask this question. Why doesn't Shakespeare finish that line that has the empty feet? In order to answer a question like this, we have to look at the lines right before and right after the unfinished line. Cam, would you read it one more time, including the line right before and after?
It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that?
Interesting. Let's dig deeper into the circumstances of this scene to figure out what's going on with those empty feet. Traditionally, the scene is played with Juliet a bit apart from Romeo, who's hiding in a spot where she can't see him. She's maybe on some sort of balcony looking out at the stars. He's describing what he sees while he looks at her. At the end of the part of the speech we just heard, he observes of Juliet, she speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? And right before he sees her do something that resembles speaking without saying anything, he has a verse line that Shakespeare doesn't finish out. So let's put our actors in the scene that way and see what happens. Brooke, could you come kneel on this chair? This will be your balcony for the moment, and it can be the place that you look at the stars and daydream. And Cam, if you will kneel, yeah, there, a little bit apart from her. Great, okay. So Brooke, you don't know that Romeo is there watching you, and Cam, you can tell the audience what you see her do and share your observations. Let's start the scene.
But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? 'Tis the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who's already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. 'Tis my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that?
Great. Now why do we think Romeo has those empty beats at the end of his line? Because Juliet is doing something there. She's speaking to herself without letting us hear what she's saying. Did you see the way Brooke moved and shifted during the empty beats at the end of his line? The empty beats are giving Juliet time to do something that makes Romeo respond and describe what he saw. She speaks, yet she says nothing. So what we just did is use the verse to decode what Shakespeare wants the actors to do. He gives them time, right there in the language, to physically accomplish what Romeo says is happening. Shakespeare plays don't include many stage directions. In a modern play, a playwright might have written in parentheses, Juliet shifts her position on the balcony. Shakespeare, on the other hand, embeds those stage directions right in his language, making space for it in the verse itself. The actors just have to know how to identify it when it happens. Now let's focus on what Shakespeare has Romeo doing in that speech. At the top of the speech, he's hiding in the dark of the courtyard, and Juliet doesn't know he's there. So who is he talking to? We could decide that Romeo is talking to himself, but that probably wasn't Shakespeare's intention. We know that although he's hiding in the dark, out of sight of Juliet, the stage was actually fully lit in original Elizabethan performances because the plays were originally performed in the daylight. So if the groundlings were right there and all the upper galleries were in view of the actors, it's likely that the actors talked directly to the audience. Let's try moving on with the scene to see how the language works and how the actors can use the clues given to them. Romeo has just said she speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Cam, talk to your imaginary audience to tell them what Romeo is feeling and experiencing as you move on with the next lines.
Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head. The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand? Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek.
Hi, me.
She speaks.
Great. Can you hear the way the verse works when Juliet starts to speak there? So the two characters are sharing the 10 beats of that verse line between them. Now, why does Shakespeare choose to have Romeo and Juliet share a verse line here? Cam, what do you think?
Well, technically what's happening is the first 6 beats, that I might touch her cheek. I, me, she speaks. She's finishing out the 10 beats.
Great. And in this case, Shakespeare has them share a verse line in perfect sync before Juliet even knows that Romeo is there, because that is romance, right? And an actor understands that in order to honor that intention, they have to speak through the whole verse line without a pause. So the actor playing Juliet knows she has to interject her words right into the verse line on cue, and Romeo has to finish the line in the same fashion. Cam and Brooke, can you demonstrate what happens if you don't pick up your cue on that line?
That I might touch that cheek.
Hi, me.
She speaks.
Thanks. I'm sure you can all hear the momentum that is gained by paying attention to those beats of blank verse and honoring the shared verse line. Shakespeare is telling the actors something about the pace at which the cues must be picked up if there are shared verse lines written into the text. And by following Shakespeare's lead, the actors can capture the sense of urgency the characters feel. Teenagers in Juliet's courtyard alone together at night, from families who hate each other, trying to express their feelings to each other, and also not be found out by Juliet's nurse or other family members. So in this lesson, we've explored how the blank or iambic verse works. We've started noticing how antithesis helps the actors make the thoughts clear. And we've learned how to make use of shared verse lines and lines with missing feet to layer in some pacing, characterization, and clues to the high stakes of the scenes. We've also begun to examine and understand how skillfully all of this information is provided by the playwright for the actor who knows how to use it. In the next lesson, we'll continue to explore how actors use these and other kinds of clues in Shakespeare's language to make specific decisions about character and action, and how being keyed into these clues can enrich the experience for actors and the audience. See you then.